You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means we are back once again for your weekly dose of all things crypto. Yes, it is time for the Crypto Rundown. I say weekly, but unfortunately we were off last week. Can't control it. Can't control the holidays here in the U.S. We were off here for the President's Day holiday here in the U.S. Hopefully all of our listeners here and around the globe had a fun, relaxing, restful start to the week. We know the week got off to a crazy mode shortly thereafter, and it's still looking pretty crazy today. Of course, my name, Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com, as well as from the ever-exciting network upon which so many of you are binging these days. If you're just joining us for the first time, Crypto Rundown, we do see the numbers. You know, a lot of people are discovering the content all the time. A, welcome. B, if you like what you hear on your platform of choice on demand, make sure you keep rating and reviewing. We'll help other newcomers continue to discover all the content that we do here. Crypto, just one of the many facets of the network. And of course, if you like to go above and beyond, you can join us over there, theoptionsinsider.com/secret club. Always fun stuff popping off there throughout the week. Ready for another great pro Q&A session tomorrow, and options oddities, giveaways, everything else live content throughout the week. Theoptionsinsider.com/secret club. And of course, however you listen, however you get these shows, make sure you keep sending in those questions, those comments. We do love to hear from all of you guys and gals out there. And now it is time to keep on rolling and kick things off. We have a lot to get to. We've been off for a week. It is time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin Breakdown.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Let's get to the Bitcoin Breakdown. Actually, before we kick that off really quickly, I have some other data we've been looking at and trying to find a way to sneak it into the show. You've been so busy with great guests and markets popping off. Haven't had a chance to. I like to crunch a lot of numbers at the start of the year. And other people always crunch numbers for the crypto markets at the start of the year as well. Here we are coming up to the end of February. We're finally getting a chance to work it into the show. It shows how interesting, quote unquote, the year has been already out there. But some interesting numbers on ETF fund flows for crypto for the crazy year that was last year. It was a record year, as you might imagine, for fund flows into crypto ETFs. Obviously, we had launches of some big ones like Bitto and others that really kind of set the crypto world and the regular financial world on fire out there as well. Who tracked this? ETFGI. They're a independent research and consultancy firm. They tracked 20.25 billion invested in crypto ETFs and ETPs. This is just at the end of November of last year. This isn't even for the full calendar year. I'm sure if you updated it now, we'd get the full calendar year as well. And so that was a record for never seen numbers like that before. The assets rose another almost 4% just from October to the end of November. Of course, that was the hot period. We saw a Bitto really coming on fire during that point there. And so far, that was towards the end of 2020, at the end of November at that point, assets in crypto ETFs had increased 549% year to date. So they were a little over $3 billion at the end of 2020. Closing in at 2021, 20.25 billion. Still a drop in the bucket when compared to other, shall we say, traditional ETPs out there, but 549%, nothing to sneeze at. November, also an active time, 1.1 billion record inflows during that month. So intriguing stuff across the board. 4 consecutive months going into the end of the year of net inflows for crypto ETPs. And again, if we ran those numbers probably for December, we probably would see that would have been 5. So intriguing stuff nonetheless. Speaking of data for the start of the year, we always like to crunch Google Trends data. We like to do it usually at the beginning of the year. In the middle of the year, we're already getting through February, so we may have to re-rack these numbers again soon. But we did run them early there into January to see how the trends, the sentiment was looking for crypto in general, Bitcoin and ETH, the big dogs out there at that period. And also see how the sentiment peaked over the course of the past year. And that latter portion is interesting as well. Let's go to Bitcoin first. That's a pretty generic search term, but still a pretty popular one out there as well. The peak for Bitcoin search interest over the past year, May 16th to 22nd. Interesting. That does kind of coincide with that summertime sell-off we saw out there. So that's when Bitcoin searches were hot and heavy. You know anything about Google Trends data? That's where the graph tops out at around 100. That's the apex. And then they compare every other data point at some percentage of that effectively. And when we kicked off the year, the interest was at about 37. So roughly a third of what it was at the height in May of last year. So interesting stuff. Interesting to see. We re-racked that now. Exactly how that's looking. Let me see if I can pull that up really quickly for us right now. Listeners, get some hot up to the minute data right now. Of course. So now they're still showing that peak being that same period. And right now, Bitcoin, you think it might be a little bit hotter? And it is slightly. It's only a 41. Especially given all the interest we've seen in crypto over the past couple of weeks, the big movements we saw even today. I think that'd be a little bit higher, but only 41. So still less than half of the Google search interest that was going on back in the peak, which was May 16th to 22nd of last year. Let's go on out to ETH. And they peaked around a similar time frame. Oh, by the way, before we get out of that really quickly, the top search destinations for Bitcoin in the U.S. Number 5, Washington. That's Washington State this time, not Washington, D.C. Number 4, New Jersey. Number 3, Hawaii. Number 2, California. Number 1, Nevada. That data always fascinates me. Let's go out to ETH really quickly as well. That peaked right around the same time, actually a little bit earlier, the week prior, 9th to the 15th. That was the apex. And kicking off the year, they were also at a 37, which is interesting. And since then, I actually just reran the numbers right now, listeners. And it has fallen off a cliff even since then. It's down about a half again, down to about an 18. So it's 18 now versus 100 in May. So ETH search interest falling off a cliff. Back when we ran these in January, top 5 destinations for ETH searches. Connecticut, number 5. Nevada, again, number 4. A lot of mining out in that area, I do believe. Number 3, Washington State, again, also a big mining area. We looked at some of the numbers for this show and seen interesting pockets of interest in the show in regions you wouldn't otherwise expect. And far eastern Washington State is definitely one of them, a big mining operation and area out there. Number 2, California. Number 1, New Jersey. New Jersey again. I have to go look. Maybe there's a mining out there in the Pine Barrens. Who knows? New Jersey driving a lot of paper out there. Speaking of paper, let's get into the actual data. Bitcoin popping off a little bit today. I did only half jokingly say over the weekend, once we saw these sanctions were kicking in, they're taking Russia off SWIFT. I was like, okay, here we go. Putin and his ilk are going to gobble up some BTC. We are seeing quite the pop. Not quite exactly along those lines. And I think we do believe we have a listener question about that a little bit later, so maybe I'll save my thoughts on that for a little bit. But still, we are seeing a nice pop on all things crypto out there today. And Bitcoin coming into the start of the show is at 41,243. Actually has ticked up a couple of hundred handles just since I started talking, up almost 10% just today. So a nice big move back over the 40K level. Interestingly enough, it's actually still down from where we were in our last show. Remember, that was 2 weeks ago, listeners. We were at 42,199, so almost 1,000 points below where we were, about 955. So still down from our last show, but back rebounding from the 30,000s range we've been hanging out in for a little bit. The low was back on the 24th, Thursday, February 24th. Remember that date. You're going to hear it a lot over the course of the next few minutes here on the show, because you're going to hear a lot on the show, because that was, of course, when the invasion really kicked off there into Ukraine and set all markets into a tizzy out there, including crypto. So the low for Bitcoin during that post-invasion shock and awe was 34,899, and the high we saw since our last show actually was right after our last show, almost 45,000, about 44,500 almost. So quite the range, almost a 10,000 point range over the course of the past couple of weeks. Coming into showtime, we are seeing vol a little bit higher. By the way, all these analytics you can find for yourselves over there at Genesis Volatility. You can kick the tires for yourselves. gvol.io is the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires out there. If you did so and you ran these numbers, you'd see we're at about a 68% right now in your average at-the-money volatility out there in Bitcoin. That's a bit higher. It's about 5 points higher than it was on our last show 2 weeks ago. You may be surprised that's not a little bit higher. We did obviously trend much higher during the madness back on Thursday, February 24th. The high then, though, not maybe quite as high as you think even then. We didn't get into the triple digits, got up to about an 89 out there. So interesting stuff before coming right back down to where we are right now. Again, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Crypto, vol, Bitcoin, ETH, a lot of them behaving very much like precious metals vol, in the sense that they can catch a bid, but they don't tend to hold it very long. And so again, it takes really some structural changes out there, maybe protracted downside, something along those lines, to really cause this vol paradigm to shift. It can, but it takes some big moves out there. Let's get on out to BitVol, which is of course our buddy Simon Ho's product out there, analogous to the Bitcoin VIX. On our last show, it was a 74. That's looking a little bit frothier. I mean, that's more of a rolling 30-day, I should say, implied volatility metric of Bitcoin options. If you don't know what the hell that means, check out our educational content here on the network, Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. We'll get you up to speed in no time. Skew-wise, looking on our last show, it was negative, as you probably would expect. Negative 6.3, and this show, negative 6.4. So you'd say, oh, well, nothing really happened over the last 2 weeks. But you would have missed the big sell-off and the preponderance of action to the dark side there on the skew back on February 24th. We got down to a negative 14. That's our intra-show low there, negative 14. So pretty bearish sentiment. Again, not really surprising, but also for all of you out there who've been kind of hanging your hat on the whole crypto as a diversification tool, it's those moments when it all hits the fan that it has underperformed dramatically. In that case, we saw big moves to the dark side out there. So if you have equities and you're relying on Bitcoin as your hedge, these days at least, you may be a little bit disappointed. Let's get out to the bit skew. That's actually come in a little bit. It was almost 96 on our last show, 95.71. That's, again, one of Simon's metrics out there. This show, a 94. So it's come in about almost 2 points. In terms of OI, actually not a lot of change net over the last couple of weeks since our last show. On our last show, the OI was 101,000. And coming into today's show, it was also 101,000. So unched on the call OI on Bitcoin, which is kind of interesting, given the pretty much 10,000 point range we've had since then. But net unched on the last couple of weeks. Puts 56,000. That's actually down 4,000. So unched and coming down on the puts. That's kind of interesting out there in Bitcoin options. Again, this is all on Deribit, which is still the big dog out there. In terms of where you folks are lining up from an OI perspective, where are the big positions from an expiration perspective in Bitcoin options right now? It's March till the quarterlies, and 60,000 contracts open in March. That's up about 8,000 from this time last week. June, number 2. So again, all quarters all the time. That's almost 35,000. That's up about 3,400 from this time last show. And number 3, newcomer to the top 3. That's September. Again, all quarterlies, March, June, September. 15,000 contracts open in September. That's a newcomer to the top 5. Let's go on out now to the size positions. Where are you folks lining up in the Bitcoin options land out there right now? Let's start from the bottom just to mix it up. Number 5 in Bitcoin options on Deribit right now, size positions. The 70,000 strike has 8,200 contracts open. That's a newcomer. We haven't seen the 70,000 strike in there in a little while. So a newcomer to the top 5 there. Number 4, back to more relevant strikes, the 30,000 strike, number 4, with 9,400 contracts open there. That's down a few hundred, not a huge change over the past few weeks. In fact, none of these really had huge changes, except for maybe one. Number 3, 60,000 strike. That has about 9,900 contracts open. That's up 500. And then we actually have a tie for 2/1. It's the 40,000 strike with 11,000 contracts open. That was up nearly 2,000. That was the biggest move we saw from an OI perspective over the past 2 weeks. And that really isn't that big. 1,800 contracts is nothing in the world of Bitcoin options. So that's kind of our biggest change for the week. And number 1, actually, I take it back. Number 1 is the 50,000 strike with 12,000 contracts. That's down 1,000. So not a tie, but we actually have a number 2, the 40,000 strike, 11,000 contracts, and number 1, the 50,000 strike, edging it out by 1,000 contracts, 12,000. It is interesting to see, again, how the OI has changed, how the big positions have changed post-December, where we really had a lot of, I hate to call it vestigial nonsense, but it kind of was just the power, the 150, the 200,000 strikes, all these kind of really outlandish strikes out there. Seeing some things that are, I mean, we still have the 70s and, all the other things, but you don't see the par strike in there. Don't see the 150. You don't see the 200,000 strike. So dare I say it, more relevant strikes for a lot of you out there, which is kind of interesting. In terms of action, again, you're going to hear this day a lot. February 24th, that was the big dog. Nearly 30,000 contracts going up on Deribit, about 28,400. That's decent. Again, that's not as many as you might think. We've had days not too long ago with more than that. January 24th, a month earlier, 37,000 contracts on the tape then. So you can eclipse that, just haven't done so. The other big day since our last show was February 17th. That was about almost 19,000. So might not be as much paper hitting the tape as you might think out there, given everything else that's been going on in the broad markets and even in the crypto markets. They are moving. Just not seeing maybe as much paper as you might assume with that. And that's pretty much reflected over there at CME as well. You go look at the CME crypto offerings. Let's start with the Bitcoin options. That OI has ticked up. It's up about 600. Actually, that's a lot for the Bitcoin options. Up to about 2,244. And we also saw a pretty active day on Friday, 344 going up. Again, doesn't sound like a lot, but in Bitcoin options term at CME, that's a huge amount. So that's a pretty active day this past Friday. So maybe we'll see some interesting trends out there. The futures, though, no joy to be found there. The OI is up about 1,000 to 11,000. Again, we've seen that OI get much higher. And we only saw 7,600 going up on Friday. So from a volume perspective, we've seen the futures do a lot more as well, well into 20 and 30,000. So 7,600, a pretty light day. Micro Bitcoin futures, kind of the same deal. The OI ticking up a bit since our last show. It's up 6,500 to 20,000. It has been higher before, though, so it's kind of getting back up to where it used to be. And about 18,000 going up on Friday. That's not much for the micro Bitcoin futures as well. Let's keep on going now. It is time to explore beyond the realm of Bitcoin. It is time to explore the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, welcome to the altcoin universe, the portion of the show where we do just that. We explore everything outside of the big dog Bitcoin, except for right now, when we're going to do a top 10. And unless something markedly shifts, Bitcoin's going to be in the top 10 of crypto assets for quite some time. Number 10 right now, so no Doge, none of the crazy ones. We actually got Avalanche, and I know there's some Avalanche fans out there in the audience. Had some of them on the network recently talking about Avalanche. It's up there to number 10. It was at an 80 even when we ran the numbers earlier today. That puts it at about a 19.7 billion worth of market cap. Number 9, Solana. That's at about 30, almost 31 billion for market cap. Number 8, Cardano, 31.25 billion. So kind of neck and neck with Solana there from a market cap perspective. Number 7, we've got good old Terra, 32 pretty much even billion. Number 6, XRP. There were some rumors. Perhaps you were going to see a detente out there, or some sort of settlement in all things XRP with the SEC. Still waiting and seeing there. 36.3 billion worth of market cap for XRP, number 6. Number 5, USD coin, 53.5 billion. Number 4, Binance coin at about 63.25 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, almost 80 billion, 79.6 billion. Numero 2, it is ETH, 333 billion. And number 1, bigger than it was not that long, just yesterday, but still lower and smaller than it was on our last show. It's Bitcoin with about 781 billion worth of market cap. Coming into showtime, ETH looking a little bit stronger now than it was earlier this week as well. 2,800, pretty much exactly when we kicked off the show. That still puts it down from our last show 2 weeks ago. It was 2,887. So 80 odd handles to the dark side. Of course, we know we got a lot lower over that span. Actually, on the big sell-off on the 24th, we got down to 2,341. It's getting back down to that 2,200 range. I know some of you are intrigued at levels like that, 2,150, something like that. We didn't get quite there. We got close, 2,341 on the 24th, and the high was on right after our show day last time. It was on February 15th, Tuesday, 31.85. So we did break the 3,000 level. Can we get there today with today's bounce? We shall see. Let's go out to the vol landscape. On our last show, the vol was about a 75. Right now, a little higher, about an 81 out there in ETH. And you might say, well, I expected more. They get up to triple digits in between. Got up to 108% again. February 24th, that was the apex for vol. And kind of like Bitcoin, coming right back off that high pretty quickly as well. Skew-wise, last show, pretty negative, negative 8.9. And right now, negative 6.8. So a little bit less negative. But in between, again, you can guess when, February 24th, it got down to a negative 18. So sentiment was decidedly bearish for a while there, going into the depths of the invasion. Again, going back to that, is it inversely correlated to your equities? I'll leave that up to you folks to decide. ETH, from an OI perspective, ETH OI coming into the start of the show. Calls still leading the dance as they have been for quite some time. And is the case in Bitcoin as well. 1.32 million, actually down about it looks about 60,000, down about 60,000 on the past 2 weeks. So a bit of a decrease there on the call side. Still ton of calls open on there, but puts 506,000, pretty much exactly 500,000 open there. That's down a little more. It's down about 18,000 from this time last week. Volume wise, same deal. February 24th leading the dance. You don't need me to tell you. 24th was the busiest day since our last show out there from an ETH options perspective on Deribit. Let's see what you folks are lining up from an expiration perspective. A little bit different than Bitcoin. We actually don't have any non-quarterly sneaking into the top 3 here, which is interesting. Number 1, still the quarterly, still March, 604,000 contracts. It's up 20,000 from this time last week. Number 2, June, 426,000. That's up 7,000 from this time last week. And number 3, February, 369,000 contracts, up a whopping 46,000. So starting to make its presence known. Will February be around long enough to eclipse June? The answer is no, because it's going the way of the dodo today. But it made a nice college try at it nonetheless. Let's go out to the size positions. Where are you folks lining up from a strike perspective out here in Bitcoin right now? Let's go to number 5 again. Number 5 is the 2,000 strike. Pretty nice in the money strike there. 94,000 contracts open there. Number 4, the 15,000 strike. So we still have some of those, shall we say, optimistic strikes open in ETH. 106,000 of those there. That's up about 1,000 from this time 2 weeks ago. Number 3, the 4,000 strike. 109,000 contracts open there. That's down 7,000 over the past 2 weeks. Number 2, the 20K strike. So again, back to the upside here. 109,000 there as well. So that's where our tie is. Tie for second/third here. Down about 1,000 from our last show. And number 1 out there, the far more relevant 5,000 strike with 122,000 contracts. Opens up about 4,000 from this time last week. Seeing a decent paper over there on the ETH futures front at CME. 4,100 going up on Friday. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a big contract out there. And the OI ticking up to about 4,000. More interesting for a lot of you out there are the micro ETH futures. Again, these just launched back in December of last year, and that OI is looking pretty robust. You folks are clearly coming to play in the micro ETH futures over there at CME. That OI is up nearly 17,000 contracts since our last show. It's up to 45,500. I do believe that's the highest we've seen out there so far. And you got another 14,000 going up on Friday. So the micro ETH futures starting to gain some traction out there. Have you folks been slinging these? Hit us up. Let us know. Let's get on out some of the other altcoin before we get to some of what you folks have on your mind from a crypto perspective. Let's get on out to XRP first. Like I said, there have been persistent rumors for a while. I mean, these rumors are always swirling about XRP finally settling their issues with the SEC, but it seemed like they were coming fast and furious recently, and not so much on the price side or really the action side, because we actually saw XRP is down about 3 cents from our last show 2 weeks ago. So no joy there for all you XRP fans. It's kind of a bit of a catch-22, and a lot of you are waiting for that decision to be lifted or reversed or something to come down. So you can hopefully, if it comes down positive, you can actually get access to XRP again on most of the major venues here in the US. But of course, if that does come to pass, by the time you get access to it again, price movement will already have happened. So bit of a challenge, I know, for a lot of you out there who've been eyeballing XRP of late. Dogecoin not looking so doji right now. About 12, almost 13 cents. It was about 14 and a half cents on our last show. So taking a bit of a break. Litecoin, same deal. 122 2 weeks ago, 109 today, down about almost 13 points from this time last week. Cardano, a little over $1 on our last show, 103. Coming into today's show is about 93 cents. So down about a dime over the last 2 weeks. Polkadot, last show about 18 and a half bucks. Today, 17.62, down a little over 80 odd cents from this time last week. Solana, 94 bucks 2 weeks ago, 96 right now, 96 and change. So up almost exactly $2 from where it was. One of the few to buck the trend. If you're looking for Shiba Inu, looking for those great Shiba Lambos, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like we're heading in the right direction right now. Down again out there in Shiba Lamb. You know, it never gets me down. It's your questions. Let's get to some of those now.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, let's get to your questions. This question comes from Misha. I also see you guys kind of debating it in our live chat there as well. Misha wants to know, do you think that Putin and his regime will attempt to use crypto assets to try to make an end run around the sanctions on Russia? This is a many and varied question with a lot of moving parts here. Misha, I kind of have jokingly alluded to this at the top of the show that we're going to see a big pop in Bitcoin as Putin and all the oligarchs go scrambling to the crypto markets. But the truth is obviously a lot more devil in those details. For example, people have been saying for a while now, Putin has been building up quite the reserve of assets so he could be somewhat sanction proof. I mean, he knows something like this was going to come to pass if he did invade. So he learned from his invasion of Crimea 8 years ago that he needs to be ready for that. So he built up a reserve. So he's not quite as susceptible. He's not going to start scrambling. And then B, if you looked at some of those SWIFT, the shutdown of the SWIFT that they were talking about over the weekend, there are some loopholes in there for energy related transactions as well. So it does seem like they will find a way to get some payments through for their natural gas and their oil. So there will still be some money flowing into those coffers. If it goes to the crypto front, I would not be surprised to see, maybe not Putin himself, but certainly some of his, the cronies over there, the oligarchs, their family members will, if they haven't already, will probably start shifting some assets into these for a variety of reasons. It's a little bit harder to track, a little bit more difficult to isolate their activity. That again, some of these oligarchs, these are big whales. If they start diving into Bitcoin, you're going to see some of these wallets lighting up with a size maybe you've never seen before. So that will get on the radar pretty quickly, as we witnessed with that couple in New York a couple of weeks ago. They were watching those wallets, so this stuff not quite as hard to track as some people might hope, but still it is maybe a little bit easier to play out there. That said, a lot of our chat talking now, who was it? Looks like Options Queen saying she was wondering the same thing. She saw Ukraine asked exchanges to freeze all Russian and Belarusian crypto accounts, and Binance says it won't do it. So that opens up another debate. How many exchanges are going to actually play ball? One of the raison d'etres for the crypto space is kind of no centralized authority, really. People like to come here because it doesn't have a lot of the issues some people might see from a centralized clearing and transaction and tracking perspective that you have in traditional financial markets. So there's a lot of moving parts to this question, Misha, which makes it kind of fascinating. One, I've kind of been watching myself. Would I expect an uptick from some of those folks over there in this kind of activity? I think the answer is yes. Is that the reason why we're popping today? No, but it could play a small part. Some folks could be out there lighting up some wallets that maybe were sitting dormant before and acquiring more crypto assets than they have before. Also, it does kind of depend on how these exchanges, how much they actually play ball. And that's still an open question. They know if they start kowtowing to government demands, even if they are against someone like Putin, which I think the entire world is pretty much up in arms against right now, they could lose some of their other customers who don't want that. So it's a bit of a catch-22 for a lot of these exchanges. So I would say Putin, maybe himself personally, I mean, he does have some assets. Let's put it out there. The guy is probably the richest world leader. He has seized a lot of state industries and assets and put a lot of oligarchs 6 feet under over the years and taken their assets, or a good chunk of them. So he's got some capital. Will he personally be putting some of that in? That would be interesting. But I think definitely we could expect some of the machinery around him, the oligarchs, their cronies, their family members, other people who have assets they want to conceal, and actually continue to do some transactions with the West to start taking advantage of these markets more. So I think it's a bit of a gray area. I think a lot of people are watching. They're not fools. The last time Putin did this, crypto markets nowhere near as advanced as they are right now, nowhere near as liquid. So it is a much more viable option now, pun intended, than it was 8 years ago when he invaded Crimea. So I would not be surprised to see some machinery or apparatus over there trying to take advantage of this. That's something I think we're going to keep an eye on. A lot of people are going to keep an eye on this. You're not the first person to think of this, Misha, but it is a good question. Let's go on out to Scott Somer. He's got a two-parter for us. He wants to know which altcoins have reasonable options markets somewhere, and where, if anywhere, can U.S. citizens trade them? And then he has a related question. He says, educate me on the crypto rundown, please. How does exercise and assignment work on options on crypto? Are they strictly settled into fiat or a specific cryptocurrency? All right. A lot to unpack here. Let's start with the second part first, the mechanics there. And the answer to that is it depends where you trade them. If you listen to our last show a couple of weeks ago, we had the folks from Backed on. And they kind of blew and exploded into the space a few years ago. They really kind of set the world on fire. People were excited because they had a physically settled contract. For the first time, you could really do a physically settled listed derivative here in the U.S. on a venue. And maybe you hadn't heard of Back, but at least you heard of their parent company, ICE. You're a little bit more faith that they're going to be around for a while. And people could actually, hey, if you had Bitcoin holdings, you could write a covered call against them, and it would take away your crypto if you wanted. And it would be physically delivered, and it would be all sorts of nice, wrapped up in a nice little bow. And as I discussed with the folks at Backed, nobody really seemed to want that, and no one traded them. We stopped talking about. We used to have our friends, the Backed volume bot updates every week on the show. We haven't done that in over a year because there's just no volume to talk about. I'm not sure if the Backed volume bot is even still running. And even when they appeared on our show a couple of weeks ago, they kind of made it sound like they were pivoting more into other digital assets like the loyalty points and things, and the futures, the physically, they even admitted it seems like the future for crypto is, and the derivatives is cash settled. So that's where they're going. Ledger X also a physically delivered settled contract. So that's answers to two of your venues out there. If you want to go have listed venues here in the US, you can do Backed, but not much volume anymore. They are physically settled. Ledger X, same thing, physically settled. They're doing more volume out there. They've been on the show as well. Go check out some of their appearances for Ledger X. They're part of that whole FCX empire now. So interesting to see. They have some resources behind them now. If you see from their bidding for naming rights and Super Bowl commercials and everything else, they got some cash behind them now. So that could maybe overhaul things. But they had some issues with liquidity. Wasn't that liquid beyond a few strikes at the money. And pretty much the predominant use case for Ledger X was what I mentioned before, the covered calls on Bitcoin. Outside of that, not a heck of a lot. They had issues with, automatic exercise. They didn't even have that. You had to manually do it. So there were some issues there. Those are your two main physically settled. And those are for Bitcoin. And that altcoin, it dries up really quick, unfortunately. I wish there was a thriving, options market on any of them. Pick your poison. XRP is kind of cheap, kind of hard to have an option on that. Doge and some others. Solana, I think we could argue, could have maybe used some options on it. Unfortunately, on the altcoin front, not so much. Let me just finish up really quickly on the other venues. CME, the options are going to settle into the futures, and then the futures are cash settled. And do they settle into fiat? Yes, effectively they settle to, on CME, that Bitcoin or the Ether reference rate, which is that kind of aggregate rate that they run. They take closing prices from a variety of different venues to try to average out any weird aberrant prices on one single venue. They come up with this kind of aggregate reference rate. That is what your contract settled to, and they are cash settled. So in that sense, yes, they are. You don't get Bitcoin with the CME contracts. You do get cash. So if that's an issue, you don't want to deal with the fiat. That could be a sticking point for you. And then Deribit, they're the big dog right now, and they have European style cash settled options. So kind of like an SPX in that sense. So European style, if you don't know what that is, listeners, you can't exercise those options during the lifespan of that option. You can only do it at expiration. So a little bit of a more limited product. Some people like that. They don't have the assignment risk that goes with your traditional American style options. But other people like the choice, and they're willing to pay a little bit of a premium for that. But Deribit, European style cash settled. So you're going to get cash settled again as well, which is maybe an issue for you out there. So if you don't like the cash settled, you have some physically delivered ones. If you want to get the actual, crypto asset in your wallet, you can go to those, but not a lot of there as well. So yeah, intriguing stuff out there. Again, it kind of varies depending on the venue you're looking at, what they have to offer, how they settle these contracts. And unfortunately, your first question, which altcoins have reasonable options markets? It's really ETH, and that's it. And that's really only on Deribit. So I wish, all of our listeners wish there were many more venues out there that offer these things. CME, getting there. The micro Bitcoin futures, as I mentioned, they're taking off. So we're on the road to micro Bitcoin options, and that will open the door to a lot of other interesting things, but we're not quite there yet. So if you don't like trading Bitcoin on Deribit or on the various US venues I mentioned here, and you don't want to do ETH on Deribit as well, which again, most of our audience in the US, I get it. Deribit's kind of a non-starter for you. So it is kind of frustrating to watch all this volume going up and not being able to participate in it. But that's when it comes to viable altcoin options markets. I mean, we've had guests on before. You can find a call around market if you're big enough for any of these. They'll do options on XRP, even back when it was in the 30-cent range and people were buying and selling options. That you can call up a desk and they will quote a custom quote for you. That's expensive. That's going to require a lot of size. So that's really why we don't talk about it for a lot of the audience of this show, which is mostly retail. So unfortunately, it's going to be Bitcoin and to a lesser degree ETH, and then kind of the settlement and exercise and what you get for them really kind of depends on which venue you're trading on. Great questions there, Scott and Misha, and everybody else. Keep them coming. All right, more debate in our chat about the Putin thing. Mr. Limited saying there's tons of room for corruption. People can own most of the currency, or they can control more than 50% of the proof of work, which I am finding out is also like owning the currency, or you can manipulate it. Yes, that's one of the issues people have said for a while with even the major assets like Bitcoin. A few whales can really rock the boat out there. So, and Putin would be a whale if he were to decide to dive into those waters, and a lot of those people in his inner circle certainly would be as well. So, hey, they make a big splash. So if they dive in, people will see them. That'll be something that'll be interesting to watch. Again, stay tuned throughout the rest of the network. If you're just listening to the Crypto Rundown, listeners, you're missing out on just about everything else that we do, which is a ton. Nearly a dozen shows here on the network these days. So get on in there. Subscribe to the full network if you haven't. And of course, we'll see you back here throughout the rest of the week. Hot Seat tomorrow, Education Wednesday, Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook Radio. Thursday, listeners of this show might want to check out This Week in Futures Options. We talk some crypto there, as well as episode 2 of the Option Block. Friday, volatility views and options oddities. Then back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. We'll see you then. Stay safe, everybody.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.